All right, so I'm Zach Pritz here with Lucas and Barry. I own ShareWell Coffee in Flat Rock, North Carolina, and we're just going to have a brief conversation about what Unblended is doing in Colombia and how we as a roaster are trying to partner with them to offer a what we think is a pretty unique coffee subscription and specialty coffee experience. So before we jump into that, Lucas, do you just want to introduce yourself and then tell us quickly about what Unblended's mission is? And then Barry, you can introduce yourself and tell us how you got involved with Unblended.
Hey guys, I'm Lucas Cuadros. I'm part of the Unblended team. I am here in Colombia. This is where most of our work happens. And Barry is our partner in the US. He'll introduce himself in a moment. But for those familiar with ShareWell, but not so familiar with the supply chain, um, we sell to ShareWell, or we provide to ShareWell the green beans that then he turns and roasts for you guys. Uh, that's like on a practical level what we do. But the way we do it is that we work with young coffee farmers in Colombia, and we help them develop their farms into businesses, and we help them build a brand. We'll talk more about why is that important and why and how this subscription especially supports that mission.
Okay, and hello everyone. My name is Barry Burgess. I'm from South Carolina. I got involved with Unblended about a year and a half ago. And before that, my background was actually in cafe and barista and cafe management for about 7 years. I worked for a cafe in Charlotte, North Carolina. Awesome team there. And while I was there, I knew that I wanted to learn a lot more about the coffee supply chain, a lot more about producers and growing coffee. I actually went on some origin trips while I was a barista and managing. Went through some certification programs to learn a lot more, and just always felt this pull to be a lot more connected to where coffee comes from. And having that pull, I was kind of always keeping an eye out for opportunities. And so, about the time that I was looking to leave Charlotte in 2020, I got connected with Lucas and Sophia, his sister, who also works with us, through some other coffee roasters in the area that I already was familiar with, and so we kind of had some loose connections. But that's how I got involved. So I've been doing it for about a year and a half now, and my role here at Unblended is helping roasters in the U.S. connect with producers, and specifically with young producers in Colombia.
All right, thank you guys. So maybe I can just start with kind of offering like the roaster's perspective on coffee. And Barry will have good insight being on the front side of things, and especially coffee. Lucas will have good insight on being on the opposite side. Well, Barry was on the front end for a lot of years, and then as a roaster, we find that uh, that there's a little bit of a dilemma, and I've talked to Lucas and Barry about this a lot. And the dilemma is that we are a part of a bigger supply chain, and what makes coffee unique is that we don't grow it. ShareWell doesn't grow coffee, and so our our goal is to purchase coffee from growers that are doing a really good job. But not every region is the same. Not every country is the same. So what roasters tend to do is we buy coffee, but then we repackage it with our own branding in a sense, and then sometimes the story of that coffee is lost. So before we even get into some of the specifics of like the problems of specialty coffee that Unblended is trying to solve in Colombia, I would say just on a broader scale, what we've always wanted to do at ShareWell is we want to honor and promote like true specialty coffee, which means that every chain along the supply chain has to have an ethical vision, has to promote the well-being of all the people involved, and then I would say has to connect the consumers to the producers. We as a roaster are not the only producer. We are a part of the production of this product. And a lot of times, though, roasters and the way that we present ourselves and the way that our coffee is presented, it appears that we are the sole producers. And of course, roasters are doing all sorts of great things to try to mitigate that problem. But through lots of conversations, we've tried to figure out how we can, better represent the producers. That's what got me so interested in Unblended. When I first met you guys, I felt like you guys were truly producer focused rather than just trying to sell coffee to a roaster, even high quality coffee. You really are trying to represent and build the brand and the well-being and the wealth and the resources and everything at the producer level. And so before I go any further on that, maybe maybe Lucas, you can tell us like where Unblended comes in to the specific problems in the coffee world in Colombia. Like what, when you got started, what sparked this mission?
That was really good context, Zach. So what got me interested in coffee is that I was living in the US. I lived for 6 years. I did college there. And then naturally people were like, oh, you come from Colombia. Do you have good coffee? So that just naturally sparked my interest and curiosity. And what I realized was that the people that were big into coffee in the US had this notion of Colombia being like the mecca of coffees. But me being from Colombia and having been raised there, I saw that there was a disconnect. People in Colombia, like they thought they had the best coffee in the world, but nobody really knew how to enjoy a cup of coffee. So that was something that got me interested. And then once I started working with coffee, just selling coffee to my friends and visiting more coffee shops and roasteries, what I found out was that there was a big marketing disconnect. There was not a lot of information about where the products and the coffees came from. It was just like this dark veil from the roaster to the farm. And then the result of that was this glorified picture of a poor producer that didn't quite paint the full picture. So I thought, charity is not a good enough marketing argument, especially since I know like how much work goes into coffee. Like there's gotta be another way to market this coffee. It's better. And so I started understanding a lot about the farm side, the producing side, a lot about what creates curiosity at the coffee shop level and what makes people want to pay more. And that has sort of been like the story of Unblended. Like, how can we work with the coffee producers and the roasters in collaboration to sell coffees better together? That has been like the central theme, this collaborative work between all parts of the supply chain, because that's with everybody's context and experience, we can bring and build strong arguments that will sell more coffee for better, and that's going to translate into more sustainable and profitable and meaningful supply chains. So.
Thanks, Lucas. Barry, can you give any of your perspective from being on the front end of the specialty coffee supply chain for those years before getting involved in Unblended? Like, what did you see as maybe a part of a disconnect that there is between the producers and the coffee that you're selling, maybe at a cafe that's not even a roaster?
Yeah, at the time, the cafe that I worked at wasn't a roaster, so we were a wholesale count of another. So um, there was even one more added layer of disconnect, at that point, because we had to go through a different company who was sourcing, the coffees that we worked with. So we really, at a barista level, like the information that you get is very distilled. It comes down this line, and sometimes what you get at the end of that line is a very little bit to work with, and you're like, well, I have this washed Colombian coffee, and that's about it. It's like you might know the farm name, or you might know the producer's name, but really there's not a lot of story that baristas, for the most part, are used to working with. And at Unblended, we talk a lot about value, like what value are we adding? Like you look at every chain in the supply chain, like what is the producer bringing to the table? Like what about their story is adding to that marketing argument, like what Lucas was saying. So as a barista, you're constantly trying to stick tools in your belt, like when you're talking to a customer, you're like, someone standing directly in front of you, and maybe it's a regular that you talk to every day. You know certain things about this person, a little bit about what they value. Zach, you're in education, like, well, I know that about you. So like there's others that are, in different types of work. There's lots of different backgrounds that people are coming with their own set of values. And so the more tools that you have in your belt, like, and the more knowledge that you have about, the coffees that you're working with, the more opportunities you're going to have to um, open the door for someone into specialty coffee, or open the door for someone to enjoy a coffee that's maybe in profile. They drink it every day, but they don't really, know a lot about it. They don't really find a lot of value in it other than it's just there. And maybe you're able to open the door on greater understanding or greater, respect or admiration for where that coffee comes from, or also to take the opportunity to say, hey, I know this about you, and I know that you value this. Like, would you like to step out of your comfort zone, based on that? Like, I know that you value this, so you might like this, and, opportunities like that are um, crucial for growing the consumer market, growing in knowledge and education, people willing to try new things, or anything like that. So as a barista, that's where I'm coming from, of this idea that the more you know about this coffee, the more tools you have to talk about it and to educate people, and to bring greater understanding into the industry.
And so, in that sense, Barry, you're it sounds like you're saying there's the supply chain ends with the barista in a sense, but then the barista may not be equipped to even know all of the information to truly provide the value to the customer about the producer who produced that coffee, which is like we don't even have a product without that. We don't even have a cafe. We don't even have a roastery without the product that is first produced at the origin. And so you're right. The barista can provide an excellent experience without any of that information, because they do value the human being in front of them and the story that that person has been told. So I think if we look at the supply chain like that, the normal supply chain, which is from point A to point B, or point C or point D, which is the producer produces it. It sort of goes through this transference down the chain, ultimately to the barista who is either making the latte or brewing that coffee. So how is Unblended? You guys talk about a collaborative supply chain. So how is Unblended re-envisioning what a supply chain should look like? And even maybe, Lucas, you can start with like, well, what's the problem with the normal supply chain? And then what is Unblended doing that's different?
Yeah. I guess let's start with a little bit of historical context, so we can have a different perspective of what's going on right now. So, like, a lot of massively consumed and traded food products since the colonial era, right? That big empires or countries would go to countries that produce these goods and would sell them in their consuming markets. They created a system that would give reference price points for things that looked or would be similar. So lumber, sugar, cotton, uh, certain types of meats, all of these things. People needed a reference point to be able to source them from different places and sell them in different markets. So that's how the commodities markets got invented. And coffee, being this massively consumed and traded products, it made its way into the commodity markets. So coffee is a commodity, has been a commodity for hundreds of years. Therefore, it has been traded in the same, following the same systems as cotton, oil, coal, lumber has. There is a central price, a central institution, pretty much setting up the prices based on future demand and future supply. There is big players in the middle that are mainly financial and logistics, and then there is an atomized, in coffee particular, there's an atomized group, meaning there's a lot of people producing these coffees, and then on this side, on the consuming side, it's turning into a more of an atomized set of consumers, right? So ShareWell being one of those consumers for this coffee. So that's like a little bit of historical context, and that, I mean, if we think about it, like I know a lot of people listening to this might be from North Carolina and South Carolina, where cotton is very important. So most of the cotton in South Carolina gets sold to Olam, and Olam is really big into coffee. Like Olam is big into commodities, so that's how much coffee is still being traded as a commodity, because it is a commodity, right? But in 1974, a lady named Erna Knudsen in California, she discovered that coffee, in fact, well, people knew this, but she found value that commodities are interchangeable goods, meaning that a coffee from Mexico is the same as a coffee from Colombia. That's like a coal or oil from Colombia or Africa is the same as from the Middle East. But Erna found value in that coffees from Africa tasted differently than coffees from Colombia. That even there were different varieties, and different varieties tasted differently. And she went further and found that even within Colombia, coffees from the north part tasted differently than from the south part of a particular country. And then she found out that customers were willing to pay more for that difference. There were some people that valued more the taste profile of coffees from Africa, and there were people that valued more the taste profile from Mexico. But this was only in 1974. So, in an essence, specialty coffee, which is what Erna invented as a term, has the promise of adding value to goods that are different and of higher quality, are unique and higher quality. But in spite of she inventing a whole industry that was based on the idea of uniqueness and higher quality, all the coffees are still traded under the same old structure as if it was oil or as if it was cotton. So big institutions that are very long, that don't give access in either way to the consumers and the producers. So what problems they create? Well, for one, the most obvious one is that if there is a centralized price given by a centralized institution, not all the production costs are the same. Like Brazil has lower production costs than Colombia and Panama because it's larger and the geography is different. Vietnam has different cheaper labor, for example, so the production cost is cheaper. And Mexico can have a totally different cost of production. So if when you have a centralized price with different cost structure, you have more countries that are more profitable than others. So naturally, it creates poverty cycles in the countries where cost is not the advantage. So that's one thing. The second thing is when you have a market that's been growing on the basis of uniqueness and higher quality, but the producers don't understand their uniqueness or their quality, you create a big disconnect because there's not a feedback loop between who's producing it and who's consuming it. So you get people here that not only the price is not good enough for them, but they're also dismotivated. They don't know their impact, the impact that they're having. They don't know who's appreciating. So that's creating one of the it's creating many problems, but it's creating fundamentally one problem. That's the one that Unblended wants to work towards solving, which is generational handoff. Because of these reasons, the average age in Colombia for a coffee grower is over 60 years old. Not enough people are going into farming as a career in the world, and including coffee, because of it's not profitable. There is a disconnect between the market, a lot of things. So Unblended believes that if we create a different way of selling and producing coffee, which is this concept of collaborative supply chain, Zach, and that specifically is bringing everybody into the same table, and by everybody is the barista, the consumer, the roaster, the producer, and ourselves. And we talk about each other challenges, and we bring each other's experiences. We can come up with creative solutions to have win-win situations for everybody. That's the fundamental. And if we do that, and if we bring the producers to the table, then there is feedback loop, then there is understanding of their particular circumstances, and then there is motivation for them to keep doing it. So because of the collaborative supply chain, we believe that most of our work is in pursuit of making coffee farming an exciting, viable, and sustainable career path for young people. Yeah, long answer. Sorry.
No, that's good. And there's when you start to open up this type of discussion, short answers, short solutions to long problems, they just don't work. And so I think this is exactly why we're doing this conversation, is because it's hard to even do our job as a roaster in a 30-second conversation with a customer across the bar from us or in the roastery. Because,
Here, one quick thought when on the metaphor of bringing everybody to the table, to this program specifically. The importance of this coffee subscription is that there will be one more active player involved in the same collaborative supply chain. And it's different than when you go to a coffee shop and you engage in a conversation with a barista once, right? And you learn a little bit. But when you're part of an ongoing monthly recurring conversation, then you become an active member of this collaborative supply chain, especially with the calls that we're going to have with the producers, because you can not only understand what goes on at every step, but you can also add your own perspective that will add more to the creative solution for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, and it generates an actual living a living supply chain, because rather than that producer selling that coffee maybe at a regional mill or selling that coffee along the way, really early in the supply chain, the producer is with the coffee the whole way. Like that's what we're going to try to do. And we can talk more
Exactly.
about how we're going to do that with our bags and our labels. But one way is that we're going to have a Zoom call with the producers and Lucas and Barry, and just try to show the consumers who are committed to this the world behind the coffee that they're purchasing. Now, it's a lot easier to see how this type of collaborative supply chain can work if you take this outside of the world of coffee, because the rise of local farmers markets all across America is a perfect testament to the desire for local food, the desire to know the people who are the artisans and the crafters behind the food that we want to purchase. It's like if you look at a baker, it's wonderful to have a local baker who buys local flour and all these things. But if we are talking about coffee, we can't broke our own coffee. So coffee presents a unique set of problems that we're trying to allow the consumer to see, and then offer the consumer an opportunity. I'm kind of tired of using that term, like because they're human beings, not just consuming things, but the human beings who are buying the coffee gives them an opportunity to be a part of the story. And so,
and for the producers, Zach, they can literally know the names of the people that are drinking their coffees on a regular basis. That's just crazy. Like that's super uncommon to see, that they have that opportunity to literally know by name the people that are consuming their coffees and enjoying them on a regular basis.
yeah. So let me give a few so that we don't go over our time here too much, but a few key features of the subscription. So what we're attempting to do, this came from quite a few conversations and emails between me and Lucas and Barry and the Unblended team, but essentially we wanted to sort of flip the way that coffee is presented in the roastery. So one of the things that we're going to do is that the bag will have a label that will be fully encompassing the farmer rather than the ShareWell's brand. So the brand more so of the producer will be brought through the bag. That's that's easy to do. Any roastery can do that. Lots of roasteries do that, and that's wonderful. But where we're taking it a step further is if you're purchasing this subscription and you're committed to buying this coffee from these producers, which all the details will be listed on our website and online, and in our shop. Like I think we're working with 6 or 7 producers because some of them have different coffees.
Yeah.
So 6 or 7 producers, but we'll have a Zoom call where you get to meet them, talk to them, ask questions. There'll be postcards in the packages, which you can write them a note that will get back to that producer themselves. And then ultimately, it's really like a matter of commitment to a place. Because we can't grow coffee, then in some sense, our place is extended. Anytime we're brewing somebody's coffee in our shop, our place extends to their place where they are, where that coffee was grown. But we need the challenge to our customer base across the board in specialty coffee to say, like, we are going to, not only is a roaster going to commit to buying the same coffee, to committing to a place and supporting those farmers, but the customer, we need to challenge the customer as well to be a part of that. To just like you find your favorite restaurant, just like you find your favorite bakery, just like you find your favorite business to support, we need to take that all the way back to the coffee producer, because really the coffee producer, without them, our businesses are nothing. We are just like we don't have a product to share with the world. So, so that our subscription we feel is pretty unique. It's something that that we haven't seen out there exactly like this. Maybe there is. I hope there is. But we're going to be partnering with Unblended. I want to give Barry and Lucas just any final thoughts. Like Barry, maybe a couple observations that you've seen and how you think maybe like something like this subscription will be unique for coffee customers.
Yeah, I mean, something like this, it's really about engagement and what you're doing. Like, yes, we're promoting young producers and we want more consumers to be, looking for coffees from young producers, but really just buying from young producers isn't, going to solve the problem. It's really about engaging. So it's like the consumers that that are already interested in specialty coffee, like, they're coming to the shops, like they're at-home consumers, they're already interested, or maybe they're just starting out in specialty coffee and they want to learn how they can make a positive impact on the coffee industry. It's really about engagement and like that collaborative effort and realizing that, like what Lucas said earlier, the supply chain isn't just exporters, importers. Like I feel like a lot of it, in history, it's been treated like that. Like producers will, hand the coffee off to, an exporter and they'll say goodbye to it and they'll just kind of like, and that's where producers kind of like traditionally will see the coffee supply chain starting, like the same way that baristas don't necessarily usually see themselves as part of the supply chain, but it really it's an acknowledgement that we're all a part of this and we all have a responsibility and we all play our own role. And so opening kind of our eyes, as consumers, baristas, roasters, importers, exporters, producers, understanding what our role is in like, and that we are a part of the supply chain. So I think it's a really cool opportunity for consumers to get involved and be engaged and be a part of the process.
Nice.
Lucas, any final thoughts?
Not. And thank you for the opportunity to wanting to think outside the box and for inviting us to this wonderful project. I hope a lot of people join and we can have a very enriching conversation recurrently.
All right. Thank you guys both for being a part of the conversation. And details for joining the subscription will be on social media, on our website, in our store. So if you're interested from this conversation, then you should not have a problem finding out all the details to join. So thank you, Lucas and Barry, for your time.
Thank you, guys. See you, Zach.